Teresa. Good evening, President DeWitt, members of the board. Dr. Pilch, you get the math lesson at this time of night. That's tough. But this is the important part. This is where the rubber meets the road, and I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you about this because it's my office and the county treasurer's office that would actually implement any mill levy override approved by the voters. We would make it happen so that dollars would flow into the district's funds, and they could be spent on all of the worthy things that the Citizens Advisory Committee has just brought to you. One of the things that's interesting about a mill levy, first of all, you've got to understand what that is. A mill levy is a tax rate, and in Colorado's property tax system, our tax rates are expressed in terms of mill, which is really an archaic, old-fashioned term. It means 1/10 of a cent. It's a way to represent the tax rate that we charge against the value of property. And I'll remind you that property tax is based solely on property value. It's an ad valorem tax, a Latin term which means of the value. So if you have a more valuable property, under the property tax system, you pay more in tax, and that will be apparent as we talk about the impact of this. So what is a mill levy override? District 6 already charges a mill levy of about 36 mills that you're allowed to charge under the School Equalization Act and the School Finance Act, which gives you a guaranteed dollar per pupil. But it's also very limiting because it doesn't mean that when you get more local valuation, you can automatically collect more tax. When you have more local valuation, the state reduces your per pupil funding and you get nowhere. And that's the situation that District 6 is in because there is no mill levy override. What the mill levy override allows you to do, it's an override of your state mandated mill levy. That's why it's an override. And it's a voter approved override. The voters in this district would have to make the decision to tax themselves at a higher rate to fund these things for District 6. This is completely within the letter and spirit of the Tabor Amendment. It follows completely what the Tabor Amendment intended to do in 1982, which was to give the power to tax to the people directly, because you would be bringing this, if you choose, as an election, and the voters would have to affirm this. And so it's completely within what people who are very strong supporters of the Tabor Amendment, this is what it allows you to do. So what would it mean? In broad terms, the $12 million request would take a certain tax rate based against your assessed value in order to yield $12 million. That tax rate or mill levy is 10.34 mills. So that would be an additional 10.34 mills to the 36 mills that are already coming to District 6. Now, everybody's property tax bill is an amalgamation of several districts. I live in Greeley. I'm a District 6 resident, and I pay to 6 districts: Weld County, City of Greeley, School District 6, the High Plains Library District, Ames Community College, and Northern Colorado Water. Those are my 6 districts. There are 350 taxing authorities in Weld County and over 3,500 combinations of districts that my office and the treasurer's office have to track. So this happens all over the place. But this would provide that additional $12 million from the folks in District 6 for those programs that have just been described to you. What does that mean? Well, for every additional dollar of assessed value, that means that the tax bill would go up 1.3 cents. That's what that means. Every dollar of assessed value would yield an additional 1.3 cents of tax at the 10.34 mills. So if I lived in a residential home, and I lived in a residential home that was worth $100,000 in the marketplace, by the time my office values it, the increase in tax would be $82 a year for that $100,000 home. That's because residential property is assessed at 7.96%. That's another operation of the state constitution under the Gallagher Amendment. So if I lived in a $200,000 house under those same rules, my tax increase would be $164.61, and so on. $300,000 would be $246, $400,000 would be $329. Now, there is one thing that we wanted to show you, because there is a special exemption for senior citizens, 65 years or older, who've lived in their home for 10 years as their primary residence. The state allows an exemption of 50% of the first $200,000 of property value, and what it essentially means is you as a district are held harmless because the state backfills those dollars. But it would change the calculation for a senior citizen, this mill levy override. There would still be an increase, but it would only be about half if you lived in the $100,000 home. The actual resident of the home, the citizen of Weld County, would only pay $41.16 for the 10.34 mill levy override. The additional $41 would be with the state reimbursement to the district. So as we go down the list, because it's 50% of the first $200,000, the same relationship would be in place for a $200,000 home. It becomes a little bit less as it becomes a larger home, but the exemption is less for larger homes already under current state law. Now, for commercial property, it's a little bit different. The assessment rate for commercial property is 29%, which means that inherently the assessed value is higher and the taxes paid by commercial and industrial property owners are higher. In the case of a $100,000 commercial property, that increase in tax would be $299.86. Running all the way up the continuum for a $1 million property would pay an additional $2,998.60 to meet that requirement of a 10.34 mill levy to yield $12 million. So I wanted to provide you with that information. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide you with this factual data because I think it's very helpful as you're evaluating whether or not this is the right thing to bring before the voters. And it's certainly going to be something that each individual property owner will have a question about if there is an election process. Because from my experience, it always comes down to what is this impact to me and my property. And so we are happy to be able to provide that to you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, I think Dr. Pilch, are you back up?
I'm going to stay right where I am. So, Mr. DeWitt and members of the Board of Education, after having worked with the Citizens Advisory Committee these last several weeks and reviewing the information from them and from our community, the surveys, the community input sessions that we held, I am recommending that we proceed with considering the possibility of a mill levy override for a possible ballot measure in the fall, and that our Board of Education would begin to identify and put together a possible funding package that would go on the fall ballot. And I would like to pass it to Ms. Holly Bressler, who's going to wrap up for us this evening and then give you a chance to ask any questions or make comments.
So the final recommendation from the Citizens Advisory Group is that we recommend that the board begin work to develop a package for a 10.34 mill levy override, resulting in $12 million in additional operational dollars annually through 2023. And we would ask you just to simply think about quality, whether you've lived in Greeley your whole life, most of your life, or are a new resident to our community. What you know is that Greeley values quality. And our district has forever been a great example of quality in our community. And this evening you've had the opportunity to meet our students, and they are simply great representatives of that adjective. So we thank you for the opportunity to be a part of a Citizens Advisory Group. We're happy to provide you with additional information if you find that helpful. And we are happy to answer any questions that you might have. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Holly. So I'm happy to have any of the Citizens Advisory Committee come up if there's additional questions that you have. We had, an hour and 20 minutes or so with our board and our Citizens Advisory Committee representatives in a work session late this afternoon. And so we had a lot of comments there, and I'll turn it to you, Mr. DeWitt, to see if there's additional comments or questions.
Well, thank you very much. And yes, I do want to reiterate that we've had the opportunity, some of us, to come to the meetings that the advisory committee has been working on into the dark several nights in a row, and we do thank them sincerely for their investment of time. I did start the conversation out with the statement that we have yet to determine whether this mill levy override will actually be going forward, but how can we make that decision without citizen input? And so we're grateful to you for that effort. Do we have questions? We did have the opportunity for about an hour plus to ask questions of this group. There may be a couple. I'm not seeing any lights. Anyone at this time have a comment or a question for members of the group? The one question that I would have, yes, now seeing Ms. Solis.
Now that I remembered where the button was. I think one of the things that we expressed in our meeting, and everyone seemed to, all the board members, was just how grateful we are to everyone that gave up their time from their families to be part of this discussion and to really have this time to work together as a community to figure out how we want to move forward as a district. And one of the things that I really mentioned was that this was a win-win. The fact that we were able to get together and have all these different lenses all at the same table and giving their opinion and what they think should, go forward with the money, what should we do with the money, and how this impacts them and what they see. This was a really great conversation for us to have as a community, and we should be all very proud of ourselves. We're changing the culture and the energy of how we work together, and that's a really positive thing.
Thanks, Ms. Lees. The question that I had asked, and I don't know if I want more than just one person to express a response to this, but here you have put in all this time and explained to your families that you're going again for another meeting, and our staff again coming to meet you. And I'm trying to hear from you your expectations of what the board will do with this information. Will we accept it wholeheartedly? Will we make adjustments? Are you comfortable with us turning this over to us and knowing us that we're probably going to mix and match some of the components? Someone want to respond to that?
Elizabeth, would you want to respond to that?
Yes, I think one thing that we knew right from the very beginning that Dr. Pilch was clear to us is that we were going to come together and we were going to listen and learn and talk a lot about this, but ultimately in the end, the final decision would be left to you guys. And I think one thing we talked about earlier with our group is that we had a lot of trust in this process. It was very inclusive. Everyone got a voice at the table. It didn't matter where you were from or what level of pay grade that you had, is that we all got an equal voice and we were able to share in that. And so I think every time we left, we felt confident that we were heard and that we were moving forward in this process. As we're all excited to present to you tonight, we know that it's a big step and there's a lot to learn, but we trust in the process, we trust in the leadership, and we look forward to seeing this down the road.
That's a wonderful reply. Thank you so very much for that. Any other comments or questions from board members? Well, we certainly want to thank you very, very much, all of you, for your investment of time in the advisory committee recommendations here tonight. And perhaps, surprisingly, you could come home early tonight if you want to take this second to escape from the room before we put you on another committee. We thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the consensus negotiations update. Dr. Pilch.
I believe we have Dr. Kevin Ayton and Ms. Pat Otto making their way to the podium to give us an update. We met for, 12 hours a Friday ago, it seems now, and we came to a tentative agreement. Our Board of Education was present, our Teachers Association representatives were present, as well as district administration. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Ayton and Ms. Otto.
Thank you, Dr. Pilch, President DeWitt, members of the Board of Education. We come before you as humble representatives and very proud and thankful that you were involved in this process as well, as we did meet for a dozen plus hours on April 29th. Your active involvement, the district's active involvement, both from administration, teachers, really made the difference. And we were able to reach what we feel is a tentative agreement almost a month earlier, 3 weeks earlier than is called for in the master agreement, which is the third Friday in May. So we feel very fortunate to be on a really excellent time frame this year.
Okay, we're going to kind of tag team the information tonight, so bear with us. We
Yes.
have a script.
Yeah.
So our consensus group agreed to a compensation package that will honor the current teacher master contract, which includes a year of service step on the salary schedule for licensed employees. Therefore, all District 6 employees will receive the equivalent of a year's service step, which is 3.75%. Because of the different work calendars, administrative, professional, and technical employees will have the compensation package begin in July, where the teachers will see the package begin in September. Licensed employees who will qualify will receive additional compensation for completing education requirements for horizontal advancement. There will be no increase to the base for the salary schedule, and the benefits package will be consistent with that provided in our current year. The recommendations in the tentative agreement will go to the GEA membership for ratification this Thursday, May 2nd, with voting beginning after the meeting through May 16th at 5 p.m. If the GEA membership approves the agreement, the final master contract will go before the Board of Education for consideration for approval.
This agreement is an investment in all District 6 staff, classified, and licensed. District 6 administration must continue to work to hire and retain the best quality employees. We've heard that tonight, to remain competitive with other employers, including other area school districts. District 6 administrators have not been able to consistently honor the salary schedule in the master agreement with teachers either, and that's gone on for several years. And now we can support staff wages, or we can say that our staff wages have lagged behind our competitors, and that's put us at that competitive disadvantage, and you've heard something about that this evening in some of the updates. Significant efforts have been made to reallocate the dollars necessary to honor the contract and compensate all employee groups and ensure a balanced budget for 2016 and 2017. These efforts include the elimination of several district-level positions. While District 6 is under market for way too many of our positions, this year's investment in compensation, we feel like, should improve hiring and retention across all of our staff groups.
The next step is to move forward with the significant work finding a solution to the current salary schedule. The current salary structure in the master contract was adopted well over a decade ago, at a time when state funding was much more robust. The negotiation team members agreed that the district and GEA leadership will commit to a long-term salary committee to do the important work of analyzing and studying pay structures to develop a plan for pay that is reliable and sustainable. This long-term salary committee will begin meeting this week to start the extensive work of developing a more feasible long-term pay structure. This work will continue throughout the next school year.
In addition to that work, the negotiation team also reached tentative agreements on these following items:
Training upgrades for staff and administration.
Communicating student behavior support.
Enhancing a staff safety protocol.
Defining teacher planning time.
And agreeing on other practices and procedures to increase organizational efficiency for teachers and staff. Thanks again to the Board of Education and Dr. Pilch's leadership in helping forge a new process and a new vision for a one-team approach to negotiations, with the best interest of the district employees and students as the focus.
We're now open for any questions. If there is any, it's really an update, and she's still got some voting and some things to do, so with her group.
Well, one of the things I feel I desperately need to do is to thank the people who are closest involved to this conversation. And it wasn't just our 12-hour get-together to look around the room and with a little bit of struggle, come to an agreement on how this could go forward. But you're taking some of the heat and burn out of the center of contention for the past several years. And the district has been unable to fund so many of these annual budgets with a compensation that would match really an unfundable salary schedule. And so that you have allowed all members of this organization to come to a different kind of an agreement. This comes in part with a new attitude and a new superintendent, but we're taking advantage of both of those things and saying, okay, we're going to move forward with something that says compensation includes salary and insurance and retirement benefits, and we look at that and we're aware that we're talking about employment opportunities and salary and benefits and insurance for all the employees of the school district. This is a remarkable change for this district. My comments months ago included the fact that we paid people to not get along with one another during negotiations. We've stopped that, and that's perhaps the greatest gift of all. So thank you for doing a stand-up job on this effort and permitting the board to take an appropriate role, to listen, to share, to learn. That was a valuable opportunity for us as well.
Thank you for your involvement.
Other comments from board members? You've heard from us, and you'll hear from us again. Thank you very much.
We'll be back.
you.
Thank you.
Don't go too far.